welcome to my LinkedIn Live today with Jude Gaal, who I've had the pleasure of first meeting on one of Brenda Meller's VIP calls, I believe. And I know that we've had a lot of conversations both there and elsewhere. And we wanted to talk, I think Jude also wanted to talk a little bit more about what targeted resumes are and how important it is to not just have a resume that speaks to everything that's out there, right?
That's right. I'm a big proponent of the targeted job search. And part of the targeted job search is having a targeted resume that really will grab that reader's attention and make them want to have you come in for that interview.
So I'd be curious to know as we start out where some of my LinkedIn family is checking in from. I know that I have my New Jersey folk here, and I don't know, Jude, if you invited anyone specifically from your part of from Canada or not. Is anyone that you'd be seeing here?
I did. I invited a bunch of people from my network, and I did have some people saying that they would show up. I don't see anything yet.
Well, I see Carol McCullough's here from New Jersey. We'll see. I mean, really speaking, what happens, people do chime in every once in a while. Here you go. I don't know who Arnold D is from Montreal. Is that someone that you know?
You know what? I don't remember that name. From Wilton. I know Kevin.
And you probably know Dean from the calls that we have with Brenda.
That's right. That's right.
And I have my other Kenneth Lang here. We kind of joke about that for sure.
Your doppelganger.
Yes, and Christy Dykman, who's going to be a future guest. So I want to get into things. How did you get involved starting out with resumes and targeting resumes?
Well, it's a long story, but and it all started out with my friends. I was always the nerd that liked to use words and write words, and people just came to me and asked for help with their resumes. I don't know why, but they did. And, it worked. They got interviews and they got jobs. And when I was out in the workforce, I was kind of a jack of all trades and master of none. I've had a number of different positions over my lifetime. And the last time I was out in the workforce doing other than resume writing, I was an ophthalmic technician and really disliked my work. And I kept on seeing this thing about, become a job search coach. And I finally, just out of desperation, made that phone call to find out what this was all about and realized that I could make a living writing resumes. So I took the certification training, and that was way back in 2006. And I've been writing resumes and helping people with job search since then.
Do you find that there's some common things, that mistakes or challenges that you have when you look at someone's resume? Things that you kind of get a little frustrated that you see the same again and again?
Oh, gosh. Yes, and yes. So I'm working with 3 clients right now, and I opened up each client's resume, and sure enough, it's a wall of bullets. Just a whole page of bullet. And there's nothing worse than that. It really, as far as a reader goes, it's like, well, where do you focus first? Because it's just all these little bullets. So that makes it really hard for the reader to read. And then when I read the bullets, it doesn't really tell me anything about what they did. And so, if I was a recruiter, I would think, well, I don't know what this person has to offer me. So in the bin, this resume goes. That's one of the big mistakes that I see job seekers make, is they're not clear about what they've done and what they have to offer a potential employer. Telling me that you're great at interpersonal skills, doesn't tell me anything. Like, tell me how many teams you've worked with, if you collaborate within multiple departments, if you work with customers, or if you work fundraising, or what is it that makes you great, that you use your interpersonal skills for. Another thing that I see too is, and this could be, disputed amongst resume writers, but I really like to put the focus on the job title the person has, and not the company that they're working for, or
Mhm.
dates. Like, you don't have to bold that stuff. Bold your job title so that it sticks out in the reader's mind, and reinforces that you have the ability to do the job that you're applying for. Um, I'm still seeing references available upon request.
Yeah.
Like, we started this conversation way back in 2010.
What I see a lot of when I'm working with people now, they have experience back from 2006, 2007, and they have the same level of listing accomplishments as they do with a recent job. And it's like, really, I mean, if you have something worth putting there, maybe put it somewhere else as an accomplishment or something. But it just makes me wonder. I think a lot of people are just out of practice and don't realize what works and what doesn't work. I know Christine has a question, which where do you get many of your clients from?
I get a lot of my clients from LinkedIn. And then once I have clients from LinkedIn, they are the ones that send me referrals.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have worked with a few clients from that Brenda Meller has sent to me. So that's another place where I can pick up clients as well. But a lot of my clients are from LinkedIn, and then referrals. Once I've worked with them, they send me other clients.
So here's a comment from Nigel. Recently, I read another article using achievements instead of responsibilities.
Oh, yes.
I feel worried that this advice comes out on a regular basis. Do people really still do this, or do some writers just have this advice on auto publish?
I'm going to jump in, Kenneth, because I see this all the time,
Yeah.
Nigel. Responsibilities include, duties included. And, as a resume writer, that just bores me to tears. So, and I'm seeing one resume perhaps a day. So can you imagine what it would be like for a recruiter or a hiring manager to read that again and again and again? And so, it's not about responsibilities, it's about what you did at that organization. So, let the reader know what you did 80% of the time at that organization, and then share your results with the reader to let them know how what you did was beneficial to the organization.
I think one of the things which I've come across a lot with resumes is something that I'm going to call "so what." Someone lists something on the resume, and my response, and I'm doing this a lot now with Lee Hecht Harrison, is "so what? Why are you putting it there? That's great, but what did you save the company? What's the benefit to you? What does it really mean?" So I'm calling it "so what" for you, and
Yeah.
maybe I wouldn't portray it that way when I'm working with someone. Do you find that as well?
Absolutely. So often. And, sometimes with some clients, like, I have to gauge it, but with some clients, I do say, so what?
Hmm.
And they get it. And that really gets them thinking about, oh yeah, you know what? You've got a good point there. Like, what point am I trying to make? How is this beneficial to the employer? How does this make me unique and valuable to a potential employer? So, yeah, it's a great question to ask. So what? And another thing that I recommend that job seekers do is, every time you put something on that resume, how is this relevant to the job that I'm going for? Ask that question. And if it doesn't immediately appear to you, it's not going to immediately appear to a recruiter or a hiring manager. So, the goal of a resume is to be really clear on what you can provide. And if someone has to go looking for that information, that resume is just going to get tossed in the bin.
Now, Joey asked a question which comes up a lot too. Your thoughts about photos or graphics on a resume? From an IT perspective, I think I wouldn't consider photos and graphics, but maybe if you're in a marketing or a different industry, that might make sense. But I'd be curious to know, is there a best practice with photos or graphics on a resume that you have?
So I'm going to say, hi, Joey. Nice to see you. I'm going to say that photos, I would not recommend. Now, having said that, if you're applying to a European market, photos are part of the resume, and that might apply to South Asia, other parts of the world. So it's really important that if you're seeking work other than in North America, what's accepted and if a photo is required on a resume. In North America, no photos. As far as graphics, I actually like them. Now, when I say that, I'm not looking at a resume that has got a ton of graphics. A resume shouldn't be an infographic. But if you've got something that's a visual that can really immediately tell an employer that you've raised profits within 2 years by 20%, just by a little graphic on the side of the resume, that can really work to your favor. Now, the thing that you also have to consider is to make sure that that information is also in the resume in written words, because the ATS will not read the graphic, but it will read the written word, and the graphic is more for the reader who downloads your resume and gives it a read after it's been pulled up from the ATS. So yeah, I like graphics. I have used symbols like icons very successfully in resumes for people in the medical field. What else have I used it for? For people in accounting. So yes, it can just add a little bit of color and flair to a resume. And I don't think it's only something that people in the graphic design or the creative field can use. I think it can be used very successfully, even for a boring accounting position.
And this brings up something interesting. Two companies, they automatically reject resumes with candidate photos in order to avoid potential criticism lawsuits for discrimination. And that is something I had not heard of before.
I'm told by senior at 2 blah 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 they can automatically
reject, which is interesting.
Yeah. So you know what? Again, know what wherever you're applying to, know what the common practice is, and so for global companies, go onto their website, see if they have any information on what they want to see in a resume. Reach out to their HR department. That's what the HR department is there for. And ask them, should I include a photograph or not?
Do you think it's important to spell out on a resume that you're available to work remotely as well? Because sometimes if you're going to apply for a job and you look online and the job is remote as well, but you're coming from 1,000 miles away, you don't want to necessarily be eliminated. Or is that just something that's maybe dated to the pandemic?
Well, the one thing that I've been reading about a lot is how companies are saying the position is remote and then changing.
Okay.
So that is something that you would have to be really careful of. Okay. And so perhaps that would be where you could reach out to your network, if you know anyone within that organization, to ask, is this position going to stay remote, or even contact the HR department and let them know that you do want remote, period. And you are not looking for a position that will turn into hybrid or in office. Just to avoid taking time to apply and then realize that it's not going to be a good fit anyways. So I would really also hope that companies, if you're just saying remote and it's not really going to be remote, then don't put that out there.
No, I agree. I think we could have a whole discussion about job descriptions and all that. And this next comment alludes to something I was working on this morning. Someone had with their education, they also mentioned classes they were taking, and I considered that may not be education in terms of higher ed, but it's definitely something to be called out. So what do you think about putting an online certificate from a Coursera or something on your resume if it's relevant?
I think it's a brilliant idea. And I would highly recommend that anyone who's looking for work right now find a MOOC course and that's relevant to the work that they're going for, and put it on there under professional development.
That was my next question. How do you define it? Because you've got experience,
Yeah.
you've got education, you've got skills. So is it if you're going to call it, what would you would give it a different title or a different section, right?
I would call it professional development.
Mm-hmm.
Now it depends. And I was just talking with a client about this yesterday. So let's say, you've taken a course, an online course, and it was 6 months. I would put that under education.
Okay.
If you got a certificate of completion or a certificate of any kind, and I would put that on the first page, because that is, if it's going to be relevant, because that demonstrates to the employer that you're keeping up with technology, you're a lifelong learner, you're taking initiative, and you're constantly developing your skills. And if you have a project that was part of the training, include that and demonstrate your ability to do the job by referring back to the project.
And I think even for people, especially in transition, who have been out for a little while, to have that section at the top is extremely helpful because it shows you've been keeping active, keeping relevant while you've been looking for a job.
That's right. That's right. And the other great thing about taking a course is you might find another student who you can connect with. And now all of a sudden your network has increased. And you've also got someone that you can perhaps start commenting on LinkedIn and helping each other grow your network on LinkedIn and share your expertise by commenting on each other's posts.
Now, Nigel, the last part of this here, do you think that career advice has evolved over the last few decades and therefore the recruitment process is improving or adapting? Basically, I mean, I think the issue for me is not so much recruitment, but it's on the hiring manager end on what they're looking for. I think we can all give best practices and advice on resumes and networking. I think recruiters are maybe a little bit hamstrung, and I think hiring managers are, but that's just me speaking in a general way. Now, you're writing a resume, and your goal is to get it to a recruiter or a company. So do you think that process from your standpoint has changed in some way, and how has that really changed?
I'm going to I'm going to say I really haven't seen a lot of change.
Okay.
Since 2007. There are very few good job postings out there. And, from what I've read on LinkedIn, even the recruiting process is just getting, it seems worse, actually. Since the pandemic, a lot of people have written about having to go for 5 or 6 job interviews, asking people, them having to do like a presentation or do a project of some kind, and then still, crickets. So I really don't think the hiring process has evolved for better, and I think that's because they have the power.
And Nigel, sort of, I think, has this.
Yeah, he's sad, and I'm sad too, Nigel.
I think we have this discussion ad nauseum about stuff, and I think whether it's a job spec or the hiring process, I think job seekers now, it's job seekers apply for lots and lots of jobs, and maybe some of them they don't think they have as good a chance at as another, but it just muddles up everything. I mean, it becomes a perfect storm. So a company gets lots more resumes from people that may or may not be qualified, and job seekers are sending it out, and it's just like overwhelming.
It is overwhelming, and I can certainly relate, with recruiters and companies, because there's nothing worse, than having a job posting for a coder, uh, and getting a resume from someone who's got plumbing experience. And these things happen all the time. It's crazy what people will submit for a resume for a job. So, yeah, absolutely. Like, don't waste your time. I'm sure you've seen those posts, Kenneth. I've sent out 1,000 resumes, and
Yeah.
I've gotten 5 interviews and no offers. Well, maybe you should be looking at those 1,000 resumes and the job postings, and not applying to so many, and really looking at what you can do and what you absolutely have to offer for an employer, because that's not helping anyone.
No, I tend to agree. I think, and we one of the things that I try to talk about on LinkedIn is the LinkedIn profile should be what's in it for me as a from a hiring manager company standpoint. And I think the resume can be tweaked that way a little bit too. Chronological, yes, you've done all these things, but what would it be in my resume that would make it relevant for me to hire you? What is it? Is it a quantifiable task? Is it something? And I don't know what the something is from a resume writing standpoint because it's not my sweet spot, but I'm sure you come across that all the time.
Yeah, and it's the job posting is your road to success. The job posting tells you all the pain points of the employer. And those are the pain points that you have to demonstrate in the resume that you can fix for the employer. And really, it's as simple as that. And if you can't fix those pain points for an employer, they're not going to hire you. And because why would they? Right?
Yeah, I think sometimes companies should be hiring someone to write the specs for the company instead of hiring managers or 3 or 4 people putting it together. They should actually have someone at the company write the requirements and meet with people and then post it up. Now, whether that's doable or not everywhere, I don't know, but it just seems to me that would make a lot more sense.
Well, I think that one of the problems with job postings is they don't get looked at. So, you've got somebody in that position, and let's say they've been in there 3 or 4 years, it never gets looked at. And, within 3 or 4 years, that position is going to evolve, and the things that a person does in that position will change. But that isn't taken into consideration, or perhaps it's quickly slapped into the old job posting from 4 years ago. And now it's kind of confusing. Not only to the reader, the job seeker, but also to the hiring manager. And so it's really important, I think, to look at that job posting and update it on an annual basis. Perhaps, when you're getting a performance review, that would be a perfect time for the manager and the person in that position to discuss how that job has evolved and changed, and how that job description should be updated.
Do you find with people that are reaching out to you, do you find something that's in common with them, that they're coming from the same amount of experience, same age group? Is there something in common with all of them? Or are you getting it from all walks of life, all different parts of the journey?
I'm getting it from all walks of life. I
Mhm.
get a lot of university students reaching out to me. They're graduating and they're looking for their first position. I get a lot of people who I would say are millennials who've been out in the workforce for 3 to 5 years and are looking to make a change, pivot, um, move up the ladder. And then I'm also getting boomers and Generation X's, I think, who who are looking for who've been laid off and are looking for their next position. So one of the things that is different in Canada than it is in the States, Kenneth, is I've read a lot of articles about, by the time you hit 40 in the States, you're considered old. Is that something that you're finding? Because it's not as severe here in Canada. Like,
I think the issue that we have all over is defining what experience is. When someone is starting out and they're an entry level position, having a company ask for 3 to 5 years experience for someone just getting out is a
yeah,
fool's errand. And
yes,
by the same token, if someone has 15 to 20 years of experience, they're portrayed as being an advanced or too expensive. And I think those are the mindsets. I remember starting out, how could I get experience if I didn't have experience?
right,
Now it's like, how can I, if I'm being discriminated against indirectly by a job spec because I have too much experience, you just want to, get what's the answer? And the answer is forget about what you want. What do you really need?
right, right. Yeah, and I think people generalize, and we all kind of do it, and they think, oh well, this person had so many years of experience, so let's put that into the job posting. Whereas really, it might not have any relevance at all. People progress at different stages, and someone with 5 years experience could be just as good as someone with 15 years of experience. So really, it's in the um, employer's best interest to really read the resume. And that's why that top third is so important, right? That's
Yeah.
why you've got to put like your best of your best
Well,
up there.
I think that's a big part of it too, is what goes on what part. And from people, and again, related to this, if you have the gap between jobs, put online training at the top, not burying it underneath where the education is, and have some things along those lines, because that's what they're going to see first. And I
Yeah,
think it's a little more acceptable than before if you do have gaps. Although what I would wonder about, and this is a question from a resume perspective, if someone's been out for a year and they're looking, how do you put down a current job with volunteer or their job title, or do you just kind of, how do you explain that away? Because you can't fake that you're not working.
right, right. So again, it would really depend on the person that I'm working with.
Mhm.
I worked with one person. He was from France and he was now here in the United States in the Washington, D.C. area. And what we did for him is when I talked to him, I said, well, what are you doing? Like,
Right.
are you just sitting on your duff or what are you doing? And he said, no, actually, I'm volunteering with an organization. And I said, okay, put that on your resume and put it at the very top because that's what you're doing. That's what's current. And it's very relevant to the work that you're going for. And so that's what he did. And he put it under consulting because he was consulting. And it got his job search moving. And so it would really depend. Um, I would have to really talk to each individual and see what would work best for that person, whether it's education or if they're doing some volunteering work or if they're doing some consulting, contract work, anything like that is good. You can be temping, right?
Mhm.
Temping is a great way to stay active, have your skills be used, and maintain your credibility.
I think you bring up a good point that not everyone, there is no cookie cutter advice that you can give for everybody. I mean, we can talk in general about best practices and suggestions, but it doesn't, what I'm going to suggest to one is not going to be necessarily relevant to another, not because they're not good, but because they have different needs or different wants from the resume.
Yeah. Yeah. And different experiences,
Sure.
right? So absolutely. There is no one fits all
Right.
answer, unfortunately.
I know one thing that drives me crazy about a resume more than anything else is that I can't read it.
Right.
It's there's too much stuff on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for me, it's about being diplomatic and suggesting in a nicer way. And that's a part of resume writing too and training is how do you get across to the people you're working with in a positive way that what they have can be improved on without them taking it personally.
Well, Kenneth, I don't know. My friends tell me that what's that old saying? I suffer fools lightly or whatever it goes. So if I'm a pretty direct person, and so when I work with my clients, I tell them that, and I also tell them from the beginning that whatever I say because I want you to succeed, not because I'm trying to be mean. And so that might mean saying to you that your margins are way too wide. You need to put some more space in between each of your jobs. Your fonts are too small, or your font that you've chosen is not very readable, or you've got like maybe a third of the second page and a lot of blank space on the second page. Let's see if we can eliminate that and get everything onto one page, or expand to at least 3/4 of the second page. Those are all things that anyone who's working with a resume writer should be open to hearing, because we're only here to help. And sometimes that means pointing things out.
And it could be not every resume is 2 pages. Some might be one, some might be three. And
Yeah.
you might have multiple versions that have some basic information in them. I mean, if I showed you my resume, you would probably tweak it to death, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, because I've been so close to my resume right now that I kind of know it really well. Sometimes you want to have another person say, really, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
Because it's like anything that you do.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm a resume writer. I've been writing for many, many years. And I always get someone to take a look at my resume before I send it off for anything. I became certified here in Canada in 2020. And I had 3 people look at my resume before I sent it off with my certification package. Because, as you said, we're very close, and we sometimes can't be as objective as we need to be. So it's always good to have someone else take a look at your resume. Now, having said that, you have to do what works best for you. I worked with one client, and there was this word on her resume, and I said, "This is kind of odd. Like, tell me more about this." Like,
Right.
and she said, "I don't know. The resume writer I worked with put it on there." And I said, like, that's not good. Everything on your resume, you should be able to comfortably talk about. And so if you're working with a resume writer and there's something that doesn't fit with you and you're thinking, I would never say that, or that's just not me, you've got to speak up and let them know.
Which brings me to the question that I get a lot of, and that's ChatGPT. How about using a tool like that, which is, for help with a resume? Like, and I put the question out there because as recruiters, the question is asked. It's out there. If someone said, what would you suggest for a resume summary, and they put down some generic stuff, or whatever it is. I mean, you must, this is both good and bad. So,
You know, this was just in my Facebook feed this morning. So it's good to get a start on what employers are looking for, but it's going to be very generic. So, in order to stand out from the crowd, you're going to have to put your own unique stamp on it. So, we're not all things to all people. So, you have to let the employer know what your strengths are and what you can bring to the organization. So, if you want to use ChatGPT as a starting point to get ideas, great. But don't send off that generic summary in your top third of your resume, because it's not going to be relevant to the job posting. And the reader's going to go, so what?
so the other thing another question I get a lot in my LinkedIn classes is, should I put my resume on my LinkedIn profile in some place?
No,
Okay.
no, no,
Why?
no, no, no.
Why? No, I'm asking for all the people that mentioned it. Why not? Why should you do it?
Well, number one, if your resume is out there, people can copy your resume. Now, if you think that doesn't happen, I actually saw on LinkedIn a recruiter who's looking for work who literally copied someone else's post and posted it as his own. So if people do that with LinkedIn posts, people will do that with resumes. Now, the other thing is, you know, a recruiter or a hiring manager might look at that resume. And when you're on LinkedIn, you're not doing a deep down dive. You're kind of like scrolling. Oh, that's cool. Oh, it's a quick read. And so I think if you're putting your resume on LinkedIn, you are actually doing yourself a disfavor, because people aren't in the right frame of mind to read a resume on LinkedIn.
So what about the LinkedIn resume writer building tool that everyone, like LinkedIn will let you build a resume. And I don't know if you've had much experience with that tool or not.
I haven't.
Okay.
I
So,
really haven't. So
okay.
I can't talk to that. Now, how about you, Kenneth? Have you been on there and seen what it does?
Well, I think it's pretty good from a very basic standpoint.
Hmm.
But like anything else, relying on a tool and it's artificial intelligence and it's taking your data by itself is not in and of itself the best way to go. So I'm just looking here. I see a question. Our resumes will not be read by HR or hiring managers unless the document gets past the ATS. I realize there may be different ATSs in use, but in general, do you have any advice as to how to format the pages using fonts and bullets for an ATS?
So, you don't want to use tables. You want to use the general fonts that are in Microsoft Office. Um, Typically speaking, the serif fonts are not as appreciated nowadays as the sans serif fonts. So Arial, Calibri, those are good standard fonts to use. Now, it's not about the ATS getting past the ATS. The ATS is basically a filing cabinet. So, what you need to make sure of is that your resume has the qualifications that are in the job posting. So, if a job posting is asking for Scrum, whatever that is, I don't know, and you don't have that in your resume, then the recruiter or the hiring manager that is going through the ATS is basically using it like Google. So they're putting in certain words like Scrum, GitHub, and marketing. And if you don't have those three words in your resume, the ATS isn't going to pull you up. Just like if you're on Google and you put in something and it's not in that document, it's not going to show up. So it's not about really getting past the ATS. It's about making sure that you have the qualifications that the job posting is
And that's
asking.
important. The qualifications from the job posting. It may
Yes.
not necessarily be the qualifications for the job entirely, but that's only the ATS aspect. I mean, obviously there's other ways to go about it connecting on LinkedIn, but I think it's knowing how the game is played, I guess, is really what it
Yes.
comes down to.
Yes. And one simple way of making sure that the ATS will be able to read your resume quickly and easily without information getting all jumbled up is to just save your resume in plain text and then review it to make sure that everything reads smoothly and there's nothing that's being kind of wonky because you put a table in there. And that's an easy, quick way to make sure that the ATS will read everything clearly.
The ATS is only as good as the person that has set it up too, because out of the box, or when you first get it, it's very generic. But an ATS person will determine what percentage of resumes they want based on what criteria and all the other things. And it's almost like an algorithm. You don't know what the algorithm is when they're doing an ATS. So your best bet is to make it as relevant as possible to the job spec.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So if you need to be able to travel for your job and you don't have that in your resume, that could be one of the knockouts.
Sure.
It's as simple as that. So, the qualifications in the job posting are really, really important to make sure you get those into the resume.
Yeah, and even with the salaries, I mean, salary ranges, when they add that as a question, very frustrating. I can
Yes,
understand it to some extent, but then you price yourself out if you put a salary that's not within the confines of their job spec. And you don't know what the confines of their job spec
that
is in more
is.
cases.
Yeah, yeah. But that's changing, right? I mean, I've read a lot about states making it mandatory now to have, a job range. Although I have,
Well,
seen companies put the salary range from like 32,000 to
and that's
100,000.
the thing. If you don't have a quantifiable, say within 5 to 10% of the middle or something like that, you can go as high or low as you want.
Yeah.
So, and it's like anything else. I mean, I think we could talk forever on this. But I want to thank you very much, Jude, for having the conversation today. When this is over, make sure I'm going to be checking back with the comments and definitely replying back. I love doing these conversations. They are so much fun. I was actually talking to Jude before. We are both introverts, and I started these because it was extremely easy to have conversations like this instead of going through a presentation. Um, Definitely check out the other events that are out there. Brenda Meller does a great one on Fridays at 10 o'clock. There are lots of groups around, but above all, stay in touch with each other with
Yes.
whatever you do.
Yes. Yes. Get a job search partner and support
Yes,
each other.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
So have a great day, everyone. Here in the New Jersey, it is snowing outside, but not sticking. So we'll definitely take that. Still getting used to a time change. Do they do the time change in Canada
Oh
also, by the way?
God.
They
Oh
do?
God, yes. We're Ontario's waiting for New York State to make the change. So once the New York State and the East Coast makes the change, then Ontario will make the change.
Well,
Please, please make the change.
the change to what? Being no more time
No
change?
more, no, yeah, no more daylight savings time.
I would love that more than anything else because I was on a call with England today and it was 4 hours versus a 5 hour difference. But again,
Ah,
thanks a lot, everyone. I'll be back and checking on the chat in a bit and commenting. Um, Check in with everyone here, reach out to people here, connect with us. We are all here to help you in any way that we can.
yes, thank you.
So
Thanks for having me, Kenneth.
thanks for being my guest.